All right, Lee, this is episode number 2. Today we talk about the new PMP exam. So you've been there since the beginning. You've seen a lot of changes. Historically, not this change, what has driven changes in the PMP exam? Why has it evolved as it has?
Well, I think in the beginning, of course, there's 320 questions, 8 body of knowledge areas, took a whole darn day. We found that that was a little cumbersome. And so we started to see ways we could reduce the numbers of questions and therefore the number of time, the amount of time that had to be spent. So it got down to 200. And now the new exam is even, they've scrunched it a little bit more, down to 175 questions. And this new thing, and I don't understand, maybe I'm not a test guy, but I don't understand. There's 5 of those questions that don't count. But you don't know which ones they are. So that's kind of a mystery to me, how that all works, but that's the way it is. 180 questions, or 175 questions, but 5 of those don't count.
Right. And they're just, I guess they're testing new questions, rolling them through. Who knows? It's probably good if they throw out new 5 ones and everybody gets them right or wrong. They're probably like,
Wrong.
oh,
Yeah, that's
yeah,
true. That's probably a good way that they do it.
yeah. So you've seen the changes over the years. Do you have any insights into what drove the changes for this update to change?
Yeah, there's 2 things I think. One is sort of a side note, is the whole pandemic thing,
Mm,
because they've gone to the testament in your house and all the things you got to do that online. That was back in April, and that sort of really set the momentum for the increase in the number of people taking the exam. I mean, for some people, it's very difficult to schedule a time and get scheduled with Pearson or whoever was doing it at that time. And
yep.
so the doing it at home was one reason. So they had to sort of realize, they could only do so much at home. And so they went to the reduced number. But the big issue, the huge issue, is agile hybrid. That you can say it any way you want, but it's
Yeah.
agile. And that's what's changed the world. I mean, we tested on the 6th volume of the PMBOK, and it was 95% predictive. I mean, we didn't have that agile babble in there. It was all predictive. And now that agile has become such a big deal, probably way bigger than it probably should be in some ways.
Yeah.
We've now got a 50-50 with agile hybrid 50%, predictive 50%. But in talking to some of the people that have actually sat for the exam without going into any detailed questions,
Yeah.
they felt like it was much more predominantly agile than it was predictive, and they really didn't prepare that way. So some people have some challenges with it. But I think what they wanted to do was kind of become reflective of the environment, because agile
Mhm.
has been, I mean, 2001 is when they wrote the manifesto, but it didn't really catch fire till 2008, 2009, somewhere in there. And then it
Right.
took off, and it took off like crazy. And then when PMI acquired Discipline Agile, well, that's right there, a firm commitment that you're moving in that direction. And so therefore they really had to make sure that the new exam
Mhm.
reflected their devotion to the importance of Agile. And I think it does that. I mean, I would say honestly to you,
Mhm.
and I'm not dumb by any means, but I don't know if I could pass the test this year. I don't know if I could pass the exam, because I haven't drunk the Kool-Aid yet for Agile. So I'd be like a lost sheep in there. I looked at a couple sample questions the other day, and I'm going, now I'm cooked. I'm not taking this exam ever again. So those are changes in content. They also made some good changes in going to much more of a scenario-based kind of a question
Love
rather than a
that.
straightforward ABCD. Now you actually have to think about
Yeah.
how you would handle it, and I think that screens out some of the people who aren't really qualified to sit for the exam,
Right.
because scenario questions, you can't study for those. You got to be able to think them. And so I
Yeah.
think that's some other changes that they've made. And they're constantly, as you said, they're constantly looking at the exam questions. I mean, we're going through a process right now,
Yep.
well, as you know, trying to streamline the training for prepping people, while at the same time making sure that the question formulation is such that it doesn't confuse people or lead people down the wrong path. So I think the word continuous improvement in the case of Sierra, as the young lady that runs that whole everything certification is,
Yeah.
Is Sierra, and I don't know how she does it. I mean, they've got so many
Wow.
certifications now. They're thinking about one that you can get a certificate if you can go to the bathroom and back without getting lost. And so there's certifications for everything, and she is really devoted to professionalism and doing continuous improvement on these things. I think she came from Cisco,
Right.
or some reputable organization. I think it was Cisco.
Okay.
So she had good steeped preparation for this job, and she's really doing a great job.
Yeah.
We've had some complaints about security issues with people selling exams, and boy, we turn them over to her, and man, she's on it like a cat. So she gets the responses real quickly. And earlier, before a year, even a year ago, you could file a complaint with PMI, and hell knows if you ever hear anything back from them. But
Right.
not that way anymore. They want it to be representative of the profession, so they're doing a good job.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's amazing what they're doing. And when you think about, better than anybody, the amount of effort and the amount of like disciplines that have to be changed every time they change, they got to change the questions. They got to change the training materials now that we've taken on, or PMI's taken on the authorized training provider program. They have to change like the way in which it's delivered, which is
Sure.
Herculean in doing that. So as far as like, I think, well, before we get into the content, just from like a provider standpoint, I think the online version it's been fantastic because like people can sit down when they're available, when they're ready, when they feel comfortable, and
Yeah.
they can just take it. And so that's opened many a door for, single mothers, regular people, super
Oh,
busy.
sure.
So it's been really, really great.
And it didn't hurt their cash flow any either.
I wouldn't imagine it did. And
Yeah, I
that's
mean,
good. It's good for the goose. Yeah.
a lot more people taking the exam because it's easy to take.
Yeah. And so when we get into, do you think the exam you might not be into the depth, but harder, easier? I'm sure the $1 million question that say is like, hey, we're adding it, Agile and all these things in there. Is it a harder exam? Do you have any kind of insights?
I think it's harder for the predictive person who steeps themselves in training on Agile when they've
Mhm.
never really done Agile. They've never actually participated in an Agile project, but yet they know they got to get 50% of the questions. So I think from that standpoint, it's harder.
Yeah.
Now, for somebody who's done, predictive is a lot more predictive. I mean,
Biblical.
that's the way we've been doing. But if an agile person is going to sit for the exam, they don't have nearly as hard a time prepping on the predictive side as the predictive do on the agile side. So I think it depends on what your background is,
Mm.
whether it's harder or easier.
Right. And then like, I mean, probably it might be 50-50 as people come into this, but PMP traditionally waterfall. So a lot of the people that were in the path or the pipeline probably worked at larger corporations, waterfall, Agile's being input into everywhere. But from a high level perspective, and we can go back and forth, like you mentioned situational, you mentioned like thinking instead of
Hmm.
memorizing, like
Sure.
to get somebody coming in and they go like, well, Lee just scared me to death because I'm a waterfall guy and I don't know how. You have any kind of like back of the envelope, how should they think or prepare to be ready or more ready for those situational kind of talk?
I was kind of looking at that the other day, and I looked through some of the agile stuff that I have around, and the more I saw it, the more uh, common sense base it is.
Yeah.
And so if I can understand the tools or the techniques of agile, the fundamental tools and techniques, it's still common sense application on how you use those. So I think it's I don't think it's as difficult as it would look on the surface, because when I look at the discipline agile stuff, and I look at that wow book they got out there, and it's just, oh, look at that, I'm going, holy crap, how am I going to
Yeah.
get ready for this thing? I don't think it's that complicated. And that's the other thing with the testing issue, is that we've got so many certifications out there that one minor change on one of those certifications could ripple an entire group of certifications. So the maintenance of incorporating the
Yeah.
latest state of the art is a big job.
It really is. I want to go back to that kind of like agile way of thinking. Like, I'll
Sure.
be honest, first time I'm gonna come from like a lean background. So like the process improvement, that kind of
Hmm.
thinking. And I didn't know that agile came from the same type of philosophy kind of approach. I am a terrible computer guy. Like turn the computer
Yeah.
on, do all these bad. And so I thought that it required me to, oh, I got to know how to code. I got to know how to do all these things. But for anybody out there that might be of that mentality that says, yeah, I'm a lean guy, I think that way, but I'm not a developer, I am not in
Mhm.
product development. What would you say to those people about kind of getting into the agile way of thinking? Do you have any insights?
Well, like I say, I'll tell you how I did it. I
All right.
actually taught I taught an agile class about 5 years ago, maybe six, when it was just kind of coming in, and I was out in Kansas City for Sprint, and they wanted an agile course, and I didn't know jack about agile, so I I bought one of those instant books, Agile Made Easy or Project Management
Yeah.
something. Yeah, those yellow covered books. Okay, and
Yeah.
I read
For
that, and
dummies
hell,
or whatever. Yeah.
yeah, I delivered a dynamite agile class. Had no idea what I was talking about, but you can learn enough to be dangerous
There you
in
go.
those situations, and then if I can take that dangerous and translate it, and how does that compare to predictive? What would I be saying if I was doing it predictive? And you start to find the commonalities that are in
Yes.
there. And so the big issue to me, it seems like, is the phasing or the sprints, if you want to call it
Mhm.
that, where you just do a little bit at a time. Where in most of the predictive, we try to schedule a damn thing all the way
Yes.
out, and then when it starts going wrong after 2 weeks, we go, what the heck? That's gets everything we did out. So now Agile's saying, well, let's not plan all the way out there. We know it's going to change. Why would you do that? So from that
Yes.
standpoint, I like it. I mean, we had a thing in the original PMBOK, and I think it might still be in the new one, called rolling wave planning.
Yep.
And basically, I use that in my courses as a way to say, look, just plan out as far as you have confidence, you know what you know, and then the rest
Yep.
of it uses planning packages. So as you get closer, reach out and pull it in. So when I look at that, in fact, I used to say in my class, now I can't because Agile people get mad at me. I used to say we really came up with Agile. We call it rolling wave planning, but these guys have written a manifesto making $1 bazillion because they called it Agile. So
Yeah.
you have to start thinking again, common sense. I think it's common sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I love the way you're talking about it. And I think there is something, like, I know it's a teensy bit of a joke to hey, I learned it by teaching it, but I, like, with all my students, I say we've got to make this yours. And so you've got to start talking about it, like, you explain it to your
Sure.
significant other, explain it to the other people, explain it in the coaching calls, kind of make it yours, try to relate to it. And the thing with Agile, like how I learned it similar to you, is like I was working in projects and saw, hey, they're doing things a different way than I'm doing it. Like, what is
Sure.
this? And so go back, not to look too dumb, learn it, and then just try to get into the flow. But once I started to understand it, it seemed like, I don't know if this resonates with you, for idea guys like you and I, like big picture thinkers, kind of movers,
Hmm.
it keeps the devil inside of me captured to say, I can think creatively, I can work creatively, but I can't do it all the time. I have a box, I have events that
Sure.
I have to operate in, and we can execute at, small chunks, and I'll have time to be creative and bring in new requirements
Well, I
and
think I think I think all of us need some stability. And if you
Mhm.
if you think about Agile in the context of its approach, you go like, well, God, we're just on the move constantly. We never settle down. We never get. But that, you got to have some stability in there. I got all of mine when I taught Agile. I learned it the same way people prepare for the exam, by questions coming from the audience. I mean,
Oh, that's a good
as a
way.
teacher, if you start getting questions you know the answers for, well, you suck. You got to know, the answers. You can't be teaching without the answers. So that helped me a lot in terms of understanding it to the extent I could teach a basic class in it.
Understood. And so let's jump back to the regular PMP, the changes to the PMP. Now
Mhm.
there have been some changes in the way in which, maybe both the way in which and the acceptable level of how it's trained, right? Like, so the authorized training provider program. What's the details around that? Like, what are your thoughts around that program? What was the genesis of that in your mind?
Well, I was a little bit shocked when they told me that they were going to do away with the REP program.
Mhm.
I was a little bit concerned. Then they explained the ATP to me, and they hit a chord with me, because my big issue at the time was the quality of the material that was being
Yeah.
delivered by some of these schlock operations. So I thought, well, this is a way to control the quality, okay, by taking control. then I started to think about the money, and then I started to think about this is just maybe another level of the game, because when you're an ATP authorized trainer, we tell you you can augment the PMI material with your own material, and pretty soon you're teaching your own material and just brushing on the PMI stuff because you're not comfortable, because you've been teaching this for 20 years and now you're being told you got to teach what they say you got to teach on the slides. So we're working on that now, as you know, to try to make this a little bit more teacher friendly, so that people don't feel like, I'm locked into this, whatever they provide me in a way of materials, when that's not the way I would teach it. That's not my comfort zone. So it's not been a smooth transition, I don't think, because of that issue. I think we're getting our hands around it now, but it was uncomfortable. And then all of a sudden you see the same thing that was happening in our REP. I think, I'm just my opinion, is starting to happen on the ATP, because authorized ATP organizations are now gathering up these people to teach the prep class. And a lot of them, they're not prep teaching people. They haven't been around long enough. They don't understand it. And so pretty soon you take a teacher who's never taught it in any depth, and all they're going to do is read the slides. They're just going to repeat whatever PMI tells them to repeat, with no relevance to reality or anything. So I still think we got some issues. We definitely got some issues, but I think that Gina at PMI is really trying to get her hands around this. I think she really wants to deliver something that the instructors, not the PMI people, but the instructors say, yeah, this is more like it. This is going to help us do our job.
Yeah, I think so. 100% with Gina's kind of leadership pushing it through. So it's a difficult job if you think about it. Like, like to license material across the world, all the different nations and cultures and instructor
languages,
levels.
multiple languages, and it's crazy.
Yeah. It's a tough gig there. But I mean, I like the way she's leading it through it and saying that it's not a, hey, here's the document, here's the deck,
right,
do it, figure it out. She's involving content, and she's like evolving it and bringing in feedback and refining, getting good people involved. So I think
I think another thing she did well this time is got new people involved.
Yeah.
I think PMI is always looks a little stale. And so you tend to see the same people and over and over and over. So I think getting a new group of people that really never been involved before will lead to a better product. So I'm pretty excited about it.
Yeah. All right. So there's a lot of people out there that say, hey, you guys talk about waterfall, you talk about agile, talk about hybrid. There's these new domains like people, process, business, environment.
Yeah.
How do they reconcile those in your mind? What are your thoughts about that? It's
well, that's the hardest part for me. I think the integration of those three components with the other parts of the processes becomes extremely difficult. I mean, we can separate traditional, predictive, and agile and hybrid. We can separate those into little components, if you will. But people, process, and business environment go across the whole spectrum. So how do you incorporate those? That's a real challenge. I frankly haven't, I'm not involved in that part of it, but I frankly haven't thought up a way to make that be a smooth transition, because the processes will be a little different for agile. They'll be a little different for predictive. The business environment. I mean, they only paying 8% of the total is business environment. I'm a little confused with that, because it seemed to me like business environment will have a tremendous impact on the way that we execute projects. But until I see how that's all rolled together, I guess I can't really comment on it.
That's all right. That's all right. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I like the fact that they're creating mental models or structures to help simplify. Some are great, some are, evolving in those things. Yeah, it'll be fun to see how it evolves, and a couple of us have a play in it, so it's good. I mean, I think one of the things from the instructor side is, how do we support instructors? Because just like students are coming at different levels, I think instructors are coming from different expertise.
Absolutely.
And so how to yeah, like, do you have any ideas about, like, if we had to, I know you're involved, like, if we had to, I have some ideas to understand how to develop these instructors. Do you have any ideas about how we might do that, or some of the things that are in the works?
I don't necessarily have a detailed approach, but here's my thinking, and I mentioned this to Gina, I think. My way of thinking is that there's got to be a more rigid qualification standard for these people teaching the prep class. You can't just have somebody that took that train the trainer class and go out and teach that. I mean, you're holding people's lives in your hands. I mean,
Very much so.
they're basing the future on whether they pass this exam or not. And you got some guy teaching it that can't walk across the street without getting hit. And so you have to really recognize that there's got to be some better screening technique. You can't just be my organization's ATP and then Bob and Sally, you go take that training class. You never taught it, but you're qualified now, so go out and teach it. And the next thing you know, they're bitching to PMI about it. And so, I mean, I think it's going to be a problem. I've heard already comments from students that had instructors that they didn't really feel were all that competent.
Yeah, it's an interesting challenge that they're going to take on. And last kind of conversation we had, you mentioned maybe that in time they develop a senior PMP or like a black belt, super, high level. Maybe just spitballing ideas that the ATPs can get them in here. And I just know with my company and how we develop instructors, we're very persnickety on who comes in the door to teach. And then before we get them in front of students, there's like, it's very tedious on how we're like building them up and developing them. Cause you're right. Like people are coming to us and they're saying, my job depends on this. My kid, like everyone has a child behind them. It seems like there's like food in mouths. Like, and I'm like, geez, this is a big deal.
I mean, come on, man, baby needs shoes. I got to pass this exam.
I mean, I got 3 of them. So it's a big deal. I got 6 shoes to buy around here. So, so it's cool. So one of the ideas that I had was, I mean, I don't know the legal side of it, but I would be open, and it's just like an open conversation with all ATPs out there. I'd be open to say, tie my results to me or my company. Like,
sure, of course.
Person comes in.
Now, I've had this discussion. I don't know if you remember this guy named Paul that was on LinkedIn all the time from Jakarta. Was a big time PMI guy in the 80s. And I mean, really, really well. And then all of a sudden, I don't know what happened. He never has shared with me, but he fell out and now he hates PMI, he hates everything about it. And they finally kicked him off LinkedIn because he was so caustic. But he has said, he and I have had this argument time and time again. He said, an instructor should be judged by the acts that their students implement. Okay. And
yes, sir.
He said, that's how you judge good students. If the teacher's good, the students will be good. And my position is this. I can know how to instruct. I can provide really good quality instruction. I can't guarantee the relative intelligence level of the students. I can't take ownership of that. And he and I, oh my God, we had so many arguments about this. I'm not going to change. I don't want to be held accountable for Bob, who can't chew gum and walk at the same time because he happened to be in my class. I just don't want to do it. And now he's got some surrogate on LinkedIn that's picking up right where he left off.
I think I've seen that guy. And I was like, what? I've even seen him tag onto your posts or guys' other posts. I mean, we might differ a teensy bit, and I don't think so. One of the ideas I initially had was, I know Oliver Lehmann from Germany. Like I was thinking about German football or soccer, or whatever they call it. That like in the Premier Leagues, I know nothing about these things, but when a certain soccer team is up there and they don't perform, they get relegated. I think the term is to a lower level.
To a lower league. Yeah, they do. Yeah.
It would be an interesting, I don't know that's pretty draconian, like to go through there.
It is.
Performance would improve potentially. But maybe it's something that PMI could do behind the scenes where it's not I mean, everybody out there outside of me says 99% pass rate. I don't know how they get it. That's really, that's impossible to do.
I think that's a lie, actually.
It's a lie. We got 94.1. So. It's really hard to do.
Yeah, like 99, I don't buy it.
Yeah, it's crazy. Inside, it would be interesting just to see the results, because as we were talking about how do we support the developing, we'll call them professors or instructors, maybe if we saw the results to say, hey, man, this is just the results, no big deal. Like, what can we do? Are you using the resources? What else could we do to help you? Could you, heck, I might be willing to have them shadow us. Like, I'd be open to whatever if it helps the goose, the gander or whatever. There's some ideas there. So we'll see.
Well, one of the risks you take, I saw this happen when I was at ESI for about, 7 or 8 years. And the owner, Ed was his name. He had evaluation sheets were it. I mean, that was it. And when you taught a class, the next day he looked at all the evaluations, and if you didn't get at least an 8, if you didn't average an 8 out of 10, he called him in and what the hell's going on here? And so what it led to was cheating.
That is
it
true.
led to, at the end of the class, the instructor begging the students to give him
me
a high
5-star
mark
rating,
because my job depends. I mean, really, they guilt tripped him in, and I saw it happen. So there's so many variables and so many places that touch one another that you got to be careful to not pull the wrong string.
Absolutely. Yeah. The consequences are big. Yeah. So, I mean, I think there's some thoughts there and how we do it and understanding how it goes. We track internally just so that we can know how it's going. Cause there's good conversations that happen about why X versus Y gets certain timelines for their students. So it's interesting.
Well, I know when I sat in that class with you, I
Mhm.
was impressed with the way you talked about the answers, talked about the questions, and used some logical thinking and got the students. I was impressed with your style. Got the students to actually think about the answer themselves. You didn't. I never saw you provide an answer. You were the catalyst for them getting to the answer. I love that. I thought that was that's what we ought to do. That's going to be turning out thinkers and not just people with a certificate.
Well, that's beautiful. Yeah, I mean, now that you mentioned, I don't think I've ever given a PMP answer. Like,
No, I'm sure you haven't. I'm sure
because
you
it's
haven't.
not about me passing the test again or you passing the test again. By the way, you said you couldn't pass the Agile. I think about a week we can get you through. Like, but it's about, you said thinkers. So like, maybe expound on that a little bit. Like, what do you think it takes to create thinkers? Just PMI. I mean, you've been around a lot of project managers. Like, I'm sure there are project managers that aren't thinkers.
You've got to have the mindset that you are going to solve the problem or the issue, that you're not going to
Yes.
rely on someone else. You're not going to have to go ask someone else. You're going to think about it and solve the problem yourself. That's thinkers. That's what good project managers do. They don't rely on other people to solve problems. They rely on other people to get stuff done. And so to me, that's why if they were ever to do a black belt senior level kind of thing, that's why I'd like to see it be. Now, if you look at the PGMP, that's closer to reality there, because hell, I just told a guy today, I was talking to on the phone, just to qualify for the PGMP, you got to be a genius, because the application process, you got to take you 2 weeks to do the application. And so I think that that's closer to what we want. I think we need to get away from, for the senior level, get away from the ABCD answers and get to what would you do in this situation? What would you respond?
Like that.
And then you got to have people that judge the answer. I mean, it gets complicated, but I think that's the way you're going to get to the senior level people. And so you can still have your PMP, but hey, maybe you're not really ready for that next level, because all 1.2 million PMPs are not equal. I can pretty much assure you of that.
100% agreed. And kind of to cycle back as we finish out here to what you initially said, where you said like some of the progressions that they're going to say more situational, more perspective based, putting themselves more, maybe it's not to that level that you just talked about. Maybe it doesn't need to be, but it is. Would you think that we're going down that road a little bit more, where if a person takes that perspective, they'll be a little bit better prepared?
Last thing, I know we're running out of time. Let me tell you, about 2 or 3 years ago, someone who I respected a lot told me that in the future, the PMP exam will be 25 questions. And by the time you answer the first 5, the artificial intelligence will already know if you're qualified. Now, I don't know if that's going to happen, but they tell me that the testing world is moving into less questions, more depth of the question. And with artificial intelligence, I mean, God knows. I mean, maybe it's a 2 out of 3.
I hope it's not 2 out of 3, because you could sneeze in this one. Who knows? But I love that, Lee. I mean, I got time to talk about this. That's one of the things that, like, a lady called me yesterday. She said, I've taken 2,000 questions. I'm still having a bad score, and blah, blah, blah goes on ad nauseum. And then I said, like, well, Like at 600, you didn't think you had a problem. At 1,000,
Yeah,
you
you
didn't
got to
think you
go
had a
to
problem. At
2,000.
1,800, you didn't think, why did you just discuss? We're 6 months down the road. Like, and I try to convince her to think differently. But like, I love the idea of quality over quantity, and to go back in there and go, what is the sample size that says foundationally, I don't understand Agile. I don't understand
Yeah, and
waterfall.
I think the more I think about project management, I think you could get it down to a lot less questions and get to the significant learning that a person should have in their minds when they come to sit for the exam.
I love that. I love that. And I mean, I'm at like when you run project managers or you had teams or other things like that. I mean, you probably you don't have hours, days to put them through some ad nauseum test. You're going to make
No,
some
no, of
decisions.
course not. Yep.
Yeah. And you're going to like say, hey, I feel confident. I'm throwing them into the fire. We'll deal with it. What happens?
Right.
So that's the way it goes. Well, this has been 2 for 2. I think these have been great. I really, really
Good.
appreciate it. So next week we go into more about like, after the PMP, what people can do, talk through there, how to
Good.
build yourself. So we can expand out. Really, really appreciate your time. It's been great. And we're going to keep these going. So thank you a lot,
Good.
Mr. Lambert.
Good. I appreciate it, Scott. Thanks for having me. I'll look forward to next week.
Yes, sir. See ya. Bye-bye.
Take care.